I'm Diana Williams, and this is the UWP Working for You.
Hello again, St. Lucia. Good evening and welcome to Sky FM and GVD TV tonight. And we're going to vibe tonight. It's a great opportunity for us this evening. And we will be speaking about something very important this evening. So I want you to call a neighbor, call a friend, let them know that Nancy Charles is on. And we are vibing tonight. And we'll be speaking about St. Jude's. As I indicated to you some time ago, I'm from the South. I'm very passionate about what happens to us in the South. But St. Jude's is not only a matter to be discussed with reference to the South, but this has a national issue. And so tonight, we have heard a lot about St. Jude's Hospital. We've heard a lot of propaganda, we've heard truths, we've heard lies, we've heard a lot of things. And I think tonight, it's important for us to clarify a lot of the issues surrounding the St. Jude's Hospital. And I'm hoping tonight that I will do it some justice. So I'm asking you to stick with me. Take down your notes as usual. It's one thing that I encourage you, St. Lucia. Every time I come on air, I'm going to give you facts, numbers, figures. So you can take down your notes. And as you go around and you hear people speaking, you can now defend from a position of authority. You can say to them, no, this is not the case. This is what happened. This is what transpired. So thank you very much and welcome. Tonight, as I said, I really want to start by acknowledging some people who are very, very critical and important to what happens in healthcare in St. Lucia, but particularly in the South. And I'm talking about the staff of St. Jude's Hospital. They have been at that stadium for years now. They have adjusted, they have settled. You know, they've been through hardships. It was a tragedy for some of them who were at St. Jude's back then during the fire. And so tonight, I want to start off by really appreciating and thanking them for their hard work, for their support. Very little is said about the staff at St. Jude's Hospital and very little complaint from them. So when they do complain and when they do come out, you know it is because they really can't take it again. And so I do want to apologize to them on behalf of this government for the length of time they have spent at the stadium, but I also want to let them know that we applaud them. They are our heroes, our unsung heroes. I also want to assure them this evening that soon and very soon, when we eventually make that transition to the new facility, this government will ensure that they do everything possible to make sure that everybody's job and position is secure as a reward for their hard work towards the hospital and towards the people that they serve. I want to say to them that you will be given a new modern facility. I know you have heard it before, and I know that you've heard it time and time again, but you will be given a new modern facility that you will all be proud of. And so tonight, I perhaps want to start off by showing you where we're at today. As of today, where is the construction of the hospital at? And I'm sure you can see, those of you who are looking at your screen, you can see on the screen some of the most recent pictures of the St. Jude's Hospital. And so you can take down and note down some of the attributes of the new hospital that we will be transitioning to. I want to say, St. Lucia, that this will be a modern healthcare facility. And this facility will meet both American, EU, Canadian, in fact, international standards with spacing, adequacy, and services. So everything offered there will meet international standards. This facility will be offering a level 4. It will be offering level 4 services with continued specialist services. St. Jude's is known for specialist services every now and then, and that will continue with this modern facility. But addition to that, there will be opportunities created for advanced medical care in partnership with foreign entities and foreign hospitals. And so the facility will ensure that we continue the level of service, but we also up the level of service that we'll be offering. This facility as well will offer us the opportunity in the South to modernize healthcare in St. Lucia. And I think it is something that the St. Lucian public has been calling for, the modernization of healthcare services in St. Lucia. It will be a 90-bed facility. There will be a new physiotherapy wing to the facility. We will have a new dialysis unit with 12 chairs. I think currently we're either at 6 or 8 chairs at the stadium, but this new facility will now be outfitted with 12 chairs. The radiology department, it will be outfitted with a CT scan, and there's also a space allocated for an MRI machine. So St. Lucia, no longer will persons from the South have to travel up to Tapio sometimes to get their scans, and sometimes you have to fly all the way to Martinique to get MRIs. This facility will be allocated all those machines as well to ensure that those type of services are offered in the south of the island. I think another exciting feature is that there will be a helipad at the top of the hospital, and so the helicopters, the emergency helicopters can land on top of the facility. So if somebody has gotten sick and that person needs to fly out for any services, they don't have to travel via ambulance up to the airport. They can now, the helicopter can land at the top of the hospital to fly persons both in and out for medical care. The staff amenities, for example, at the facility as well will be upgraded, and so there will be in-house lodging for on-duty or on-call doctors and also technicians, and that's a new feature as well, because St. Jude's currently does not offer any lodging for technicians who may have to be on standby throughout the night, and so this new facility will be offering that. Various units within the hospital will be outfitted with their own cafeteria and kitchenettes. And so, for example, the staff of the ICU, because of the sensitive nature of what they do there, instead of you having them going out to the main cafeteria, and that allows for cross-contamination, they will now have their own kitchenettes and mini cafes in their own areas. The admin staff and various aspects of the hospital will have their own kitchenettes. But the hospital cafeteria as well, those of you, if you look at the pictures on screen, you will see that there is a space for a courtyard, and in that courtyard you will have the cafeteria, and so it's going to allow for both indoor and outdoor dining. Very modern facility that will be offered at St. Jude's Hospital in the south. I'm very, very excited. The parking lot, for example, it will be uncluttered, so there will be spacing, a separate spacing for the staff, the doctors, and spacing for the general public. And so at the end of the day, it allows for people to drive in and park in comfort, knowing that your vehicle is secure as you go in and access the various services at the hospital. The cladding of the hospital is something that is also very modern. So the cladding of the hospital, you would see, if you see a picture of the cladding of the hospital that will be put up on your screen, that cladding is fire resistant, St. Lucia. So as they say, once bitten, twice shy. The cladding also provides advanced cooling and heating properties. And so throughout the day, the material ensures that the building remains cool. It will be very efficient in usage of electricity, and so you will not have to use too much of your air conditioning to cool down the place, because the cladding allows for it to absorb all that coolness. And the structure is also designed with climate adaptation in mind, and that at some point in time, if we wish to harvest solar energy to run certain aspects of the hospital, you can do that. So St. Lucia, you can see that there's been a lot of thought, a lot of planning in ensuring that the promises that have been made to the people of the South and to St. Lucians by extension, with reference to St. Jude's Hospital, I have given you just a little snippet of what to expect, and you can certainly see that this administration will deliver on that promise in giving St. Lucia a level 4 medical facility. But why did we have to build this new modern facility? Why is it that we are where we're at today in building this new modern facility? What happened? We had a hospital before. I'm sure many of you can remember Tuesday, September 9th, 2009. And then you would see on the screen perhaps just a gentle reminder of what happened on Tuesday, September 9th, 2009. I can remember that day very well, or that time, because unfortunately the Sunday, that was a Tuesday, the Sunday, my grandfather had passed away, and he was taken to St. Jude's Hospital, but I think the Monday he was transferred up to VH for an autopsy, and so he was not in the hospital facility at the time of the fire. But we'll play the clip for you for the hospital on September 9th, 2009.
When I heard the news, I could not see. So I had to get up and come up to St. Jude to see what's going on.
While the fire services were undertaking a tremendous job at controlling the fire, immediately the discussion was, what next?
Yes, St. Lucia. I'm sure it brings back some sad memories for some of us.
Discussion was
on that day. I can remember clearly I was at home when I got the call from a nurse friend of ours who lived down the road, and she called my husband to say that there was a fire and that she needed a ride to go to the hospital. It was a very sad day indeed for us, St. Lucia. And so immediately after the fire, you heard at the time Honorable Stephenson King was Prime Minister, and his first thoughts were, what now? What do we do now?
For me, cost was
the initial plan.
I saw it as a necessity to expend whatever resources that would have been required to reconstruct the facility, to save lives, and to bring the services of St. Jude Hospital within the shortest possible time.
The intention, as Honorable Stephenson King explained, was to restore and to reconstruct in the shortest possible time to allow for restoration of services at St. Jude's Hospital. And I have here with me as well a report, a handover report for the period ending 14th August 2016. That report was written by Shanta King. It was a handover report. And on page 4 of the report, she said, the goal of the project initiated was to rebuild St. Jude's Hospital, to reinstate the core and ancillary health services previously offered to the public in keeping with the government's health sector objectives, and expanded when necessary. The design was expected to produce an effective and efficient healthcare facility according to modern day requirements. And so the government of St. Lucia took an approach, a two-pronged approach, to develop the restoration of St. Jude's Hospital. So St. Lucia, right after the fire, you had a government and an administration whose only goal was to rebuild St. Jude's Hospital to reinstate services as soon as possible. However, there were a few challenges in getting to restore that on time. And so on page 5 of the report, Ms. King explains that due to the nature of the project, it was initiated in phases to allow for simultaneous designs and implementation. Although the main building damaged in the fire was the surgical building, government took the decision to undertake a wide-scale renovation, keyword, renovation of the facility, as other components were in a state of despair. As the buildings were originally built in the 1940s and continued to pose a risk to the operations of this important healthcare facility at that location. And this included degraded electrical infrastructure, asbestos roofing material on all buildings, asbestos-lagged pipelines, inadequate water storage and wastewater treatment, and general dilapidated building infrastructure. And so it was felt that since we are going to renovate, perhaps let us take some time to fix some of those issues as well. You know that asbestos has been linked to cancer, and so it has been something that all persons with buildings that had asbestos, they had to remove it, and so the decision was taken to do so. And so Prime Minister King indicated at the time that it was only going to cost approximately $2 million for the restoration and renovation of the damaged wings of St. Jude's Hospital, and also to undertake perhaps some of the repair of the building. And so it took a little time to sit down, to design, to put everything together, and construction began in earnest in September 10th, 2010. And so you had the fire on September 9th, 2009, and 1 year later, the team was put together, financing was being sourced, design and re-outfitting, etc. And 1 year later, on September 10th, 2010, construction began. I think a lot of people felt that it was a long time. I clearly remember the opposition at the time putting a lot of pressure on the government, indicating that it was way past time to begin construction, way past time to complete St. Jude's and to hand over St. Jude's to the people of St. Lucia. And so construction began, and that is where everything else began. And so some things changed, some things remain. However, St. Lucia, I don't know if you remember this famous word, something called cost overruns. I think that was a new terminology that was introduced in our dictionary here in St. Lucia. Cost overruns. But we will take a little break in a while, and when we come back after the break, there is another new terminology. When I heard this one, I was intrigued. It is called scope creep. What is scope creep, St. Lucia? You knew what was cost overruns after the fact, and then perhaps we will say after the break and understand what is scope creep. So we will take a break, and then we will come back and discuss scope creep. Hello, St. Lucia. Join me, Nancy Charles, every Wednesday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sky FM 93.1 and GVD TV channel 115 for Vibes.
our country tomorrow depends on the extent to which our young people are equipped to assume the mantle of responsibility. To place emphasis on the youth is to articulate an act of faith in a better tomorrow for our people. The late Louis George, Education Minister. It is my responsibility to tell the stories and to relate the realities of substance, leadership, and perseverance, bringing you the evidence of good governance, transforming lives, the literature and principles, performance, importance, and brilliance of the United Workers' Party. I am Diana Williams, and this is the UWP working for you.
My MP said that we would have a new wellness center. Here we are. It's almost finished.
My community said we needed a new wing to our secondary school. And my MP said yes.
My sister said she needed help to find a job, so my MP created a job fair.
Our athlete said we needed better sporting facilities.
A new early childhood development center.
My neighbors said.
My sister said.
The children said.
Community said
Roads and a new park. And my MP said
yes.
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 Of course.
Nous tous, c'est une famille en Micoud Nord. Et nous continuons pour faire progrès avec Antigale.
Bienvenue à sous Sky FM et puis ring the bell 93.1. Limo ici là c'est 456093. Moi ici là tous les jeudis, vendredis, samedi 8h jusqu'à 10h soir. Moi aussi à sous GVD TV et puis Facebook Sky FM, matchez ça et puis Blamecall.
Hello, St. Lucia. Join me, Nancy Charles, every Wednesday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sky FM 93.1 and GVD TV channel 115 for Vibes. Hey, St. Lucia, welcome back. We've been talking about St. Jude. We've been talking about the reconstruction of St. Jude. We've been talking about the fire that damaged a particular wing or section of St. Jude. And I also gave you information on the nature of the project during the 2010 era under the Stephenson King administration. And before we went into the break, I introduced a new terminology. I can certainly tell you that I had not heard of that terminology before. And so I want you to get an appreciation of this. So in the own words of some individuals, I'm going to play you some clipping of scope creep. I want you to write down that word. It's a new word. And after you hear from Mr. Percival McDonald, you'll also hear from somebody else, Mr. John Peters, and we will go into a discussion about scope creep. So let's start with Mr. Percival McDonald.
Three options. The option was you can stay here, it's going to cost you a little more, and you're going to be containing your expansion. Or you can move to a new, start anew, it'll cost you a little less. The decision at that time was, listen, the community is already used to the hospital being here. Everybody understands St. Jude's. The community has built up already. The assessment of the building itself was sound, because the Americans, I mean, if you see the building, strong. So the decision, everyone took the decision from the political point all the way down that we would remain where we are. And of course, that would put certain limits to what you can do with the building. And that is where some of the technical problems came in.
Problems. That's where some of the technical problems came in, because we decided to stay where we were. Some of the renovations that included in this were a new roofing system with fire protection, new electrical installation, new plumbing installation, new hot water installation, specialized flooring system, a new elevator installation, new furniture and equipment, and new medical equipment. Sounded very simple to the ordinary man. And so let's now go to Mr. John Peters, who's going to give us some further explanation.
Highlight St. Jude's as a case study in cost creep and project creep. I think it goes down in history as one of the most fascinating subject matter in the history of scope creep, as well as cost creep. Right. This project was evolving and metamorphosis was occurring. It was shape changing from, if you talk about change a caterpillar into a butterfly, I think it reversed. It probably started off as a butterfly and ended up as a caterpillar. So you saw a project that was constantly moving and shaping and shifting, and as a result of that, it is reflected in what was seen in the budgetary allocations and in the budgetary presentation that we saw. It is impossible for 6 consecutive years a Minister of Finance can come to the people of St. Lucia and to say to them, this project is going to finish in this financial year. The question is, are those persons who have been assigned to the project, do they have the experience in building a hospital? And the answer would be a resounding no.
St. Lucia, every time I hear this interview and every time I hear those statements, my mind goes back 1,000 times. How did we get from the point of renovating the damaged structure and changing some basic things? As we said, we needed to change the roof. Of course, that's understood. You had asbestos and you needed to have new electrical installation. The place was built in the 1940s, etc. And now we have something called scope creep and cost creep. Now, creep is something, those of you perhaps for definition, is something that comes up slowly and slowly and slowly upon you. And so the scope of the project, as you heard from Mr. John Peters, it continued to evolve. It continued to change. It continued to move. It was shaping and it was shifting. So these are terms that does not speak to stability, to something or somebody knowing what they're about, but it speaks to somebody that you're doing things on the go. I looked up the definition of scope creep, and Pembroke Guide describes scope creep as adding features and functionality without addressing the effects on time, cost, and resources, or without customer approval. So you've decided perhaps you're adding an extension to your family, and maybe in extending that family, a baby is coming into the play, and you've decided you're going to add a little room, an extra room on the house to facilitate that. And then all of a sudden, every day when you wake up, something new comes up and a decision. You say, well, why don't we do this? And then why don't we add that? And why don't we change it into a master bedroom? And why don't we put a little balcony on it? And why don't we do this? And why don't we do that? Let's hear from Dr. King in terms of how this happened and how this occurred, because these people were integrally involved in the project scope and in the management of the project. So let's go to Dr. King.
And then the thinking goes like this. Well, if we're going to change the roof, why don't we look at renovating the hospital to make it more efficient and functional and modern? And then we say, oh yes, that's a good idea. And the medical schools are down there, so we want to incorporate medical education into the school. So why don't we build an auditorium so that we could have lectures and classes? And by the way, we never really had a very good outpatient area, so why don't we can renovate the outpatient area? So when you get into these kinds of discussions, Dale, you can see how rapidly you begin to develop a far more grandiose plan, which is what we did.
There was scope creep.
There was scope creep.
Could you define?
You heard that, St. Lucia? I didn't say it. It didn't come from me. It came from the horse's mouth that every day we decided, well, why don't we change this? And we decided, why don't we change that? I mean, how does something like that happen? How do you wake up every morning and you wake up every day and you go as a project management team and you decide, well, we'll change this and we'll put this together, etc. You know, sometimes people call this thing like this T-boutique thing. You know, I don't understand it. I do not know how to explain it. And so certainly I did allow for the players, the people who were involved, to explain it. I'm happy that they were very honest with you, St. Lucia, and you saw for yourself that when people are out there and they're talking and they say, St. Jude's, give us St. Jude's, St. Jude's, it's taken 10 years to build St. Jude's. I wanted you to get an appreciation tonight of what exactly transpired at St. Jude's. What is it that took place at St. Jude's? That in 2010, the scope of the project under Stevenson King was to just do those minor repairs. But what happened? Why did that scope change? And why did we have scope creep? And why did we have all of that happening? What happened, St. Lucia, was in 2011, you had general elections. And so the United Workers' Party lost the election and you had a new administration coming in. This new administration came in and all of a sudden, the scope of the project changed. The grandiose of the project changed. All of a sudden, St. Lucians were being promised a bigger, modern hospital facility. But you would recognize, based on the statement before by John Peters, Dr. King, and so forth, that there was not a scope to the project. So it was something you were doing on the go. That was a disaster. And certainly that was a disaster waiting to happen as well. And so I want to go to one of the contractors, one of the main contractors on the project, who's perhaps going to explain to you how we ended up with that scope creep, how we ended up with the cost creep as well, because the costs continue to rise. You will understand very shortly, from $2 million, that was the initial amount by Stevenson King, just to renovate the damaged wing and change the roofing and put some electrical, etc., etc. Where did we end up and how we ended up? So let us go to one of the contractors who was on the project, and perhaps he can give us a little bit of an explanation as to what exactly transpired. What were the directives being given to him in terms of that project?
Of the project would come with some sketch, which they'll ask you to put this partition in the morning. Let's say on a Monday or Tuesday morning, you'll get some work program. And by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when you have set all your profile, starting to put blocks, you'll get a call, hold on that. And you will put to hold for at least 2 weeks. They'll send you somewhere else. While you are doing the other part where they give you to do, they'll call you and tell you demolish the first set that you have done. And that was something that was coming like every now and then. You will build a corridor for the emergency room, and you will ask to, after you have put all your interior wall behind it, we were asked to demolish it because it was too small. For instance, the dialysis building, we build up all the partitions. After we have put up all the partitions, then we were told that the partition was not to suit, demolish it. But we are working according to specification. Whatever drawings they give us, we were going according to the drawings that was given to us.
Who was giving you these drawings?
Conrad Emmanuel, Manjit Singh signed it, I was working under the supervision of Colonel Emmanuel and Manjit Singh as the consultant on site.
And Colonel Emmanuel.
St. Lucia, you heard that? I'm sure you heard. We were asked to demolish. We were working according to specifications. We were given a plan. But after we had constructed, then 2 weeks later we were asked to go and do something else, and then 2 weeks later we were asked to break down. Wastage, pure wastage. And all this time you had a prime minister, and I want you to appreciate that. The prime minister was the parliamentary representative for Vieux-Fort South, St. Jude's located in the south. He was the minister of finance at the time. And then you had at least the three ministers responsible closest in the south, the parliamentary representative for Labrie, Vieux-Fort South, and Vieux-Fort North, all of them in government. And all this time, this wastage was happening under the leadership and the purview of Dr. Kenny Anthony. Why did Dr. Kenny Anthony allow this to happen? Why? Let us hear what Dr. Kenny Anthony said when he came into office. In 2012, he conducted a site visit with the then Minister of Health, Miss Alvina Reynolds at the time. And let us hear what Dr. Anthony said in 2012.
Overall, the quality has been good. I found nothing really to complain about in terms of the quality of the work.
During that site visit, the Prime Minister estimated that the hospital would be completed by August 2012 at a cost of $60 million.
That within 3 weeks, windows will be installed, and then you can begin the cleaning up process and the laying up the flooring and installing equipment.
Wow. There was nothing to complain about. The quality was good. And so the question that we need to ask from 2012 until 2016, why did it take 5 years and the hospital was still not completed? I'm sure you heard the minister said that by August of the same year of 2012 that the hospital would be completed. And so I want you to understand that without clear guidelines, without a clear scope of works, without proper consultation, this is what happens. This disaster is what happens because you have everybody doing their own thing. There's no consolidation. It's just like a runaway train. This was a runaway train. And all this time, Dr. Kenny Anthony had the authority. He was the Minister of Finance. He had oversight, and nothing happened. Additionally, Dr. Kenny Anthony, I think, continued to borrow against the project. He borrowed from the Taiwanese. He borrowed, I saw borrowing from the IDA, from the World Bank, etc. And so no scope, no guidelines, but yet still you have a country who goes on to borrow every year in the budget statement after statement, keep asking for more money to pump into St. Jude's Hospital, something that was supposed to cost us $2 million, St. Lucia. Eventually, we ended up with $98 million. $98 million is the cost that we have in the Shanta King report as to what had been expended from the construction date of 2010 to 2016. And so, as a new administration coming in 2016, certainly something had to be done. You had new dates being given. I think there was it was the joke of the century. Every week, every month, Minister of Health, Alvina Reynolds, gave a different date for reopening, for opening the hospital, for completion, etc., etc. I think it was cruel as well. It was a very cruel thing to do to the staff at the stadium of St. Jude's Hospital, because you keep giving them that hope when you know clearly that this project is not going to be completed. But you keep giving them dates. You keep putting them in a mindset where they think that they will be moving, they will be leaving that facility time and time again. I think it was a very cruel thing to do. But Dr. Kenny Anthony, he kept coming to Parliament to borrow. New dates kept being given, and St. Jude's was no closer to completion. And so I want to show you just a little clipping of Dr. Kenny Anthony in 2012 when he went to Parliament to borrow again against St. Jude's.
That continues to be a priority for the government of St. Lucia. Government is committed to mobilizing the resources required to bring the reconstruction works to completion. Since the commencement of the renovation works, there have been a number of changes in strategy and expansion in scope of the works. This was necessary to ensure that the works being undertaken were compatible with the critical needs of St. Jude's Hospital, but also to facilitate improvements in clinical services. Mr. Speaker, I am anxious for the nightmare of the people of the South to end. I pray that, as promised, that all major works will be completed by August 31st, 2012 to facilitate testing and commissioning prior to the relocation of St. Jude's Hospital from the George Odlum Stadium. When complete, the reconstructed facility at Cantonment will remain the permanent home for St. Jude's Hospital. In this upcoming financial year, government has approved a budgetary allocation of $15.9 million, which is required to bring this project to completion.
And with that,
you heard it, St. Lucia? In 2012, the then Prime Minister said that they needed only $15.9 million to bring the project to completion and to open up the hospital. And he said that he was anxious for the nightmare. But I think for the people of the South, the nightmare had only just begun. The nightmare was not going to end, but the nightmare had just begun. And why? He fired the contractor. And he brought in a new contractor. This same contractor in 2012, just a few months ago, this is the same Prime Minister, I showed you the clipping, when he came and he said that he had no issues. He had nothing to complain about. The quality was very good, and that this project would be completed by August. He fired the contractor and he brought in a new contractor. But did anything change with the new contractor, St. Lucia? Do you think that anything changed when he fired the contractor and he brought in a new contractor? We're now into 2013. 2012, August has passed, and we're in 2013. But I'll show you what has changed. I'll show you what changed, in fact, in 2013. There was no audit. There was no oversight of the project. Shoddy works, shoddy contracting. And don't think that the cost creep, cut costs, break down walls, give a design, break down that design the next day. Don't think that stopped, you know. This continued. This continued even with the new contractor. This continued. Wastage of the St. Lucian public funds. And yet still every day you hear them crying, St. Jude's, St. Jude's, open St. Jude's. This is what happened at St. Jude's. The wastage of the public's money. And all this time, this was sanctioned and approved by Dr. Kenny Anthony. You had Halco Group who took on the supervision of the work. And based on the report, they had no experience no experience in hospital construction. And the contractor himself indicated that the gentleman who was supervising the project, Mr. Mandish Singh, he came on site once every 3 or every 6 months, they would see him. But yet still, Halco Group was given 2 service agreements. The first contract was issued at $277,000. Now I want you to listen to that carefully, because this is the outcome of the changing of the contractor. If you think that things would have gotten better and you would have had construction progressing, the first contract issued to Halco was to the tune of $277,000. Within a 9-month period, that contract increased to $4.8 million. From $277,000 to $4.8 million to Halco for supervision of the project. The second contract issued to Halco was issued at $2.06 million. And again, it increased to $6.6 million. There was no rationale, there was no reason, there's nothing to show by Halco for $4.8 million in the first instance and $6.6 million in the second instance. Again, you have a Minister of Finance who's supposed, and he was Minister of Economic Development as well, and that project was being constructed or being oversight was being provided by the project management unit of the Department of Economic Development, who coincidentally, the Prime Minister at the time, who was the Minister of the Finance, was also the Minister for Economic Development. And again, he's from the South. He said he's concerned about the people of the South. He wants the nightmare to end, but the nightmare is only just beginning. To date, no one can find the approved plans for the project. After such length of time, after you've had project scope creep and cost creep, you've had all this construction happening for years now, and you still had no approved plans for the project. It's very interesting as to how Dr. Kenny Anthony was able to borrow money against that project when he had no plans. There was no scope, there was no clear plan. I don't know how he was able to borrow that money. However, I can tell you that the monies were borrowed and the monies were being spent. And so, it would be interesting to ask the question, St. Lucia, who benefited? Who was the real beneficiaries of that money? We will take a break, and after the break, we will discuss why we had to stop the project in 2016 when we came into government, why we had to stop the bleeding, and I will tell you who benefited from Kenny Anthony's wastage on the St. Jude's project. We'll take a break and we'll be right back. Hello, St. Lucia. Join me, Nancy Charles, every Wednesday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sky FM 93.1 and GVD TV channel 115 for Vibes.
The character of our country tomorrow depends on the extent to which our young people are equipped to assume the mantle of responsibility. To place emphasis on the youth is to articulate an act of faith in a better tomorrow for our people. The late Louis George, Education Minister. It is my responsibility to tell the stories and to relate the realities of substance leadership, and perseverance. Bringing you the evidence of good governance, transforming lives, the literature and principles, performance, importance, and brilliance of the United Workers' Party. I am Diana Williams, and this is the UWP working for you.
My MP said that we would have a new wellness center. Here we are. It's almost finished.
My community said we needed a new wing to our secondary school. And my MP said yes.
My sister said she needed help to find a job, so my MP created a job fair.
Our athlete said we needed better sporting facilities.
A new early childhood development center.
My neighbors said.
My sister said.
The children said. Community said.
Roads and a new park. And my MP said.
Yes.
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 Of course.
Nous toutes, c'est yon famille en Micoud Nord. And nous continuons pour faire progrès avec Antigale.
Bienvenue à sous Sky FM et puis ring the bell 93.1. Limo ici là c'est 456093. Moi ici là tous les jeudis, vendredis, samedi 8h jusqu'à 10h soir. Moi aussi à sous GVD TV et puis Facebook Sky FM, matchez ça et puis Blamecall.
Bienvenue à sous Sky FM 93.1 et puis Dr. Sigwe lundi pour vendredi. Ça c'est 4h30 pour 8h au soir. Côté Dr. Sigwe ka encore nous. Côté nous ka discuter qui ça qui ka fait en pays. Nous aussi à sous Facebook et puis channel 115. Ça c'est GVD TV. Join-moi lundi pour vendredi à sous Sky FM 93.1 et puis Dr. Sigwe encore nous.
Crossfire, discussing the issues. Norbert Williams, Champagne, Dr. Secret, and Ring the Bell. Thursdays, 8 p.m. on Sky FM and GVD TV. Don't you miss it.
Hello, St. Lucia. Join me, Nancy Charles, every Wednesday evening from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sky FM 93.1 and GVD TV channel 115 for Vibes.
The character of our country tomorrow depends on the extent to which our young people are equipped to assume the mantle of responsibility. To place emphasis on the youth is to articulate an act of faith in a better tomorrow for our people. The late Louis George, Education Minister. It is my responsibility to tell the stories and to relate the realities of substance, leadership, and perseverance, bringing you the evidence of good governance, transforming lives, the literature and principles, performance, importance, and brilliance of the United Workers' Party. I am Diana Williams, and this is the UWP working for you.
My MP said that we would have a new wellness center. Here we are. It's almost finished.
My community said we needed a new wing to our secondary school. And my MP said yes.
My sister said she needed help to find a job, so my MP created a job